truth, logic, common sense, that gut feeling, and yes, even a little psychoanalysis, as we are once again together, you and I, to discuss Chad and Lori Daybell. Well, folks, it's Sunday. KJ usually don't come to y'all on a Sunday, but, I needed to for several reasons. First and foremost, I want to thank Red Handed and Bill, that's Red Handed is Lori, and her husband Bill, for being so gracious to me Friday evening. I thought I would go up to Nashville and kind of meet them and spend some time with them, and I'm going to tell y'all something right now. Oh, KJ went off the deep end. Woo! I had one heck of a Friday night. If I had a video of Red Handed doing the karaoke and KJ doing the karaoke, I'd have had y'all all laughing your asses off. I'm telling you. But we had a great time. We went to dinner and we went to this karaoke place. They had excellent pizza. A lot of beautiful young people there at the karaoke. Kind of makes me remember how much older I am. But it was a lot of fun. I hadn't done that in a long time. And I just felt really good about meeting Lori and Bill is what their name. And, I didn't get a chance to share with any of y'all some gifts that Red Handed had brought me. And it was so special, y'all. Look at this. I'm going to show it to you. Look, it's a hat that was specially made that says, "As we are once again together, you and I." And I'm going to wear this on Valentine's Day, y'all, when I do my live stream. All right? That's how much I think this pink hat and the sentiment behind it touches my heart. Also, y'all are going to laugh your asses off about this. Lori and Bill gave me a flask that says, "Give me a break. Give me a break." Can y'all believe this? I told him, I was like, yeah, and the funny thing about it is I'm always talking about John Pryor going in the back of the room there to get him a sip off his flask. Oh, my gosh. It was a beautiful, beautiful evening. We had a great time. They also gave me some some bath and body spa stuff, a candle and some soaps, and it was just very sweet. Very sweet of them to do all that. But I'm coming to y'all today because I've run across something from the audio that was released the other day on the hearing with Lori's attorney. And I really studied it word for word because I want justice through understanding. And if you'll bear with me, you're going to see that OKJ's uncovered a little bit of something, all right? Now, this is a topic that's been brought out in the audio that, I got to kind of walk that tightrope because y'all know me. Y'all know I am far, far from perfect. I'm a sinner saved by grace. I do my best, but I mess up very, very often. So I don't know that it should be, I don't know how to say this, but the subject matter that we're going to talk about needs to be laid with a foundation. And I want to say this first and foremost. If you were in a store, like say you were in a store, and you looked over and you saw someone stealing something, putting it in their purse or putting it in their jacket or whatever, would you be judging them by saying that person is a thief? Or are you just calling it for what it is? There's a distinction there, right? I mean, we're talking about this person steals something, and yet someone else cannot say you're a thief. That would be judging them. I don't think so, y'all. I think it's just calling it out, right? You leave it up to the judicial system and the laws to pass the man's judgment on people. You see, God's law is a little bit different. And we're going to go into that. Now, it might seem like I'm going to get all preachy here and all that. But let me just be clear. This has everything to do with the Chad and Lori Daybell case. And I want you to leave it in the comments what you think about what old KJ has uncovered. Now, at the 30:53 mark of the audio of the last hearing, you had Rachel Smith say something that perked old KJ's ears up. She began to talk about the state's expert. The expert's name is Dr. Weller, Weller. And I was like, well, okay. First and foremost, why would the state need an expert in anything? And she is making it clear that they have an expert. Because the state of Idaho and the prosecuting attorney's office are not going to get an expert unless they see what the defense is doing. You see, they have to rebut. They have to be able to bring in an expert from anything that they're hearing from the defense side of things. So this is what Rachel Smith is talking about. She says, Dr. Weller is wanting to come in as an expert on hyper-religiosity, that's a very big word, versus using religion as an excuse or justification. And I was like, hyper-religiosity? What in the heck? That's a high-dollar word. Oh, KJ better start looking into this, because I knew it was important. I knew it was. The state has this expert, Dr. Weller, who's going to be coming in to talk about these two issues. And I thought, well, wonder which defense attorney has released their discovery on their defense. And it couldn't be on the trial defense, because they've already stated in Lori's case that they're not using a mental health defense and that they're not going to be using experts until when, y'all? Until the penalty phase, right? The sentencing phase. Remember we talked about mitigation that would keep Lori from getting the death penalty and all of this stuff? So let me just get through this and you listen up. And I've learned something, and I hope you will too. Hyperreligiosity is a psychiatric disturbance in which a person experiences intense religious beliefs or episodes that interfere with normal functioning. Hyperreligiosity generally includes abnormal beliefs and a focus on religious content. Hyperreligiosity is characterized by an increased tendency to report supernatural or mystical experiences, spiritual delusions, rigid legalistic thoughts, and extravagant expressions of piety. Hyperreligiosity may also include religious hallucinations. But listen to this, y'all. When you think of this word, you think, oh, this has got something to do with someone who's got a religion. Religion's in the word. But factually speaking, y'all, hyperreligiosity can also be expressed as intense atheistic beliefs. So that tells you right there, it does not have everything to do with religion. It can include someone who's an atheist, you see? Now we get to another part of this word, this high-dollar word, that might also have a physiological definition. Hyperreligiosity may also be associated with epilepsy, in particular temporal lobe epilepsy, involving complex partial seizures, frontal temporal lobal degeneration, hallucinogen-related psychosis, and a psychotic disorder. In persons with epilepsy, episodic hyperreligiosity may occur during seizures. Increased activity in the left temporal regions has been associated with hyperreligiosity and psychotic disorders. Now, listen up. Does Lori have a psychotic disorder? Because she could have hyper-religiosity, and the state of Idaho's prosecuting team has an expert on this topic, along with, is it that, or is it just using religion as an excuse or justification? Does Chad or Lori have brain damage in some way? A brain scan that shows anything in the temporal lobe? These are things we need to think about. But what's interesting as I researched hyper-religiosity is it doesn't go into anything at all about criminal behavior just because you have this. Now, I've gotten through that, and I want to focus in on these things. Some of the symptoms of this is rigid legalistic thinking. And what that is by doing good works or by obeying the laws, a person earns and merits salvation. In other words, going to heaven, right? So that would be a symptom of this hyper-religiosity. And also extravagant expressions of piety. Well, what is piety? The quality of being religious or reverent, okay? So those are two symptoms in this. And I got to thinking, well, does Chad and Lori, do they have the quality of being religious or reverent? They're just, reverence meaning they have a real serious belief in their religion. And do they have this rigid legalistic thoughts that says if they do all this, they obey the laws, a person earns their way to heaven? Well, I guess the first thing you would want to say is, what kind of laws would Chad and Lori break? I mean, they haven't got any criminal activity that's on the record per se. Lori had been in contempt of court in the past, which is, it's kind of breaking the law. But you don't see anything in Chad, and ultimately, y'all, they didn't have any criminal record before all this stuff happened. So, hyper-religiosity, does Chad and Lori have it? Well, I guess we need to see whether or not they have these symptoms, as I just laid out to you. So, let's go to their religion, their beliefs, right? Their beliefs had to, obviously, include, if they're really going to do the overall deal there and have some reverence and piety, would be the 10 Commandments. And how many times have all of us talked about that they broke all these commandments? Now, hear me out. That's why I brought up about someone stealing in a store and you saying they're a thief. Just because we have evidence that they broke these 10 Commandments, I'm not sitting here being pious or anything, because Lord knows OKJ has broke a few of the 10 Commandments several times in my life. I've asked for forgiveness. I don't know if I'm going to break any down the road, but the bottom line is I'm not here to be a hypocrite, and I'm not here to be holier. Now, I'm trying to break down why the state has this expert and whether or not the defense has put this defense out there in mitigation for the penalty phase, okay? And many of us know what the 10 Commandments are, but for some of you that don't, hey, if you're not religious, if you're atheist, I don't think there's a single commandment in the Holy Bible that you couldn't even agree on. I mean, think about this. Other than to say you could substitute things if you don't believe there's a God. But the first one would be, I'm the Lord your God. You shall have no other gods before me. Okay? Well, we know Chad and Lori consider themselves lowercase g's. hopping from planet to planet. Chad said he was Jesus, Christ at one time. Lori said she was face to face with Jesus. They talked about these different lives. They lived on different planets. James the Just, Elena, we know all about that. But anyway, it doesn't take a rocket scientist or someone schooled in theology to realize that Chad and Lori made it very clear, empirically clear, that they thought they were lowercase g's. And with that said, that's even worse because they put themselves before Almighty God, okay? Number 2, you shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain. And some people misinterpret that. They think that's got to do with GD or saying the word God. Don't say his name in vain, right? But the Hebrew word translated into English of this in vain comes from the word it's SHAWV, okay, which means emptiness or vanity. Thus, we're not to claim faith in God in an attempt to feed our vanity or in any way that leads to emptiness. This idea is captured in the words of Isaiah 29:13, and it's quoted by Jesus in Matthew 15, verse 8 and 9. This people honors me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. In vain they do worship me, teaching as doctrines the commandments not of God, but of man. And this really, I see it. Maybe you don't, but I'm telling y'all now. In other words, bearing God's name in vain refers to false teachers, hypocrites, and those who do wrong in God's name. And we've all said it. They said that they were doing all these things for whatever reason, all these things, because God wanted them to do it. This is, they were lowercase g's. They were given the authority. If you want to talk about, the second atonement or the keys to something or seeing beyond the veil, that's really what it comes down to. Now, then the third 10 commandment is remember to keep the holy the Lord's Day. And I guess it all depends on, because I know what Holy Scripture says, and I have researched it enough to know that most of the time Sundays are, is the Lord's Day. Some people do this on Saturday as well, but overarching, generally speaking, the Lord's Day is on Sunday. Now, with that said, I'll leave it in your lap. September 8th of 2019 was the 36th Sunday, and September 22nd of 2019 was the 38th Sunday, okay? And that's if you believe it happened on the 22nd. Some people believe it was the 22nd into the 23rd. But if you are not sure about Sunday, September 22nd of 2019, the bottom line is Lori and Melanie Gibb and David Warwick and Chad were hanging out, which brings me to another one, and that is you shall not commit adultery. And, Lori and Chad can say that they were married in a different life, so it really wasn't anything wrong there going on. But folks, this goes back to what I said at the beginning about the state's whole situation. Let me get it. Where they're talking about using religion as an excuse or justification. Do you think Chad and Lori were committing adultery outside of their religious thinking? Do you think that they were just putting their religion aside and just decided to do this thing? Had this sexual relationship while both of them were married? That's really up for you to decide. Then we've got honor your father and mother. And, I don't know. Really, ultimately, all I know is Lori and Chad both lied to their parents, from what I understand. I know specifically, Chad was telling his parents that Lori was an empty nester or something to that effect. And Lori, she told her mother Janice, I don't know what she told Barry, but Janice and Summer came out on there saying Lori, everything's fine. Lori says everything's fine. So I feel like, and I'm sure y'all can agree, that Lori lied to at least one of her parents, and Chad lied to his parents, okay? That's not honoring your parents, Then, of course, we get to the major issue here, and that is one of the 10 Commandments is you shall not kill. I don't know how more Chad or Lori could say what they did to Charles, JJ, Tylee, and Tammy and tried to do to Brandon. I don't know how they could interpret that any different. I mean, when you kill someone, whatever you're thinking, you're killing them. You're killing them. You're taking their life from them. That is another thing. Also, you shall not steal. We know that Chad stole from the insurance company with insurance fraud. And we know that Lori continued to collect Social Security benefits, stealing from a governmental program. Okay? And, we can throw in there that she took Charles's money. There was some stealing going on, y'all. Pure and simple. They were thieves. Pure and simple. Then we get to another one, and that is you shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. And we're not talking about just your next door neighbor who lives right next door to you. A neighbor is anyone, someone you know. And and I know that Chad and Lori bared false witness against many people, against law enforcement officials, calling them dark canes. Lori saying that Charles was doing all these things when he wasn't. Chad talking about his wife, bearing false witness against his wife, saying she had a demon named Viola in her. Give me a break. Give me a break, right? And they bared false witness. And if you really want to spill this out some, Melanie P's calling Brandon gay, and he's doing all these things, and it just seems like that these cult members, all of them, you could look and see where they were bearing false witness against the victims' family members. Just think about it. Think about what Lori said about Kay and Larry Woodcock. I mean, come on. Those are just some examples. I'm sure you can think of others. Please put them in the comments. And then we get to the last two, and both of them are you shall not covet your neighbor's wife. You shall not covet your neighbor's goods. So that basically says to covet means to wish for, to long for, to crave. You think that Chad didn't crave Charles's wife? Or do you think that Lori craved and longed for Tammy's husband? And how about this whole bullshit about Chad going and telling people at church that Lori had all this money and everything? I think Lori lied to Chad to try to make it look like she was more than she really was. And obviously, Chad did the same. They coveted each other's spouses, and they coveted what the other had. Lori wanted to be with Chad Daybell, not because of him as a man. She saw him as an author and that he had this potential for money. She built him up by reading his books and thinking he was a kindred spirit or whatever the hell she wants to say it was. And Chad looked at Lori in all her beauty. And maybe y'all don't want to hear this, but Tammy was a beautiful woman. But he'd spent many, many years with her. And, he saw Lori as something fresh, something more exciting. And, there's no doubt in my mind As far as KJ is concerned, and I stick with this, knowing that I myself am a sinner. I mean, I am. I'm a sinner. I'm saved by grace, but I'm a sinner. That Chad and Lori broke every one of the 10 Commandments. So why am I telling you this? Because for hyper-religiosity, there are 2 symptoms in there, and one of them is rigid legalistic thinking, thoughts, which is by doing good works or obeying the law, the person thinks they're going to go to heaven, that they earn their way to heaven. So they couldn't have had, Lori or Chad, have hyper-religiosity. What they had, in KJ's view, obviously, just wanted to justify, they were trying to justify what they were doing using religion as an excuse. And I think most of us know that. But the reason I bring this to you is because Rachel Smith has made it clear that her expert, Dr. Weller, is going to differentiate between the two. And I believe it'll be through mitigation when the defense says, Lori had these issues and this was hyper-religiosity. She had a psychotic disorder, or they show a brain scan. Their expert, the state's expert's going to go, no, there's a difference between the two. Also, another symptom of hyper-religiosity is piety, extravagant expressions of piety. And that is the quality of being religious or reverent. And, one thing that really kind of sticks with me is if Melanie Gibb thought that Chad and Lori were the king and queen of the 144,000, and that Lori and Zulema and all them were starting to become translated beings, and that they were going to start the Church of the Firstborn and all of this stuff, then how could she sit there and watch them commit adultery? And knowing what she knew about Lori talking about Charles's insurance, and trust me, y'all, Melanie Gibb knew the other just underhanded things that Lori did, pure and simple. So then you could say Melanie Gibb sure did not have any piety, and Chad and Lori had no real piety in the symptom of hyper-religiosity. So we've covered that side of things when I say that the state is going to try to differentiate between justifying things through religion or hyper-religiosity. So does belief in God encourage criminal behavior? Did Chad and Lori's religious beliefs, whatever they were, and we knew they were all screwed up, which to me adds to it. But you have to answer the question, can religion lead to criminal behavior? And if it does, then the criminal behavior that's done, can they justify it? Can Chad and Lori say that all these people were murdered because of their belief system? We've asked this question many times. So I looked and I was researching, and there was this article by J. Warner Wallace. And this was a study done from really hardcore criminals. And I thought, well, that don't match Chad and Lori, but Chad and Lori's actions and the crimes that they committed were hardcore. They just wasn't doing them for a long time. Although I have to say, even Mark McGarry says, well, Chad couldn't have just done this out of nowhere. There's a possibility he's gotten away with it in the past. Whether we ever find out, who knows? But just think of it like this. These two, Lori and Chad, they're serial killers. And by the way, how could they just do this in a vacuum and never have done anything before, i.e. Joe Ryan perhaps? So anyway, I'm going to read this, and it'll be clear to you why I'm trying to differentiate and get us ready for this expert with the state. This J. Warner Wallace says, as an atheist police officer, I was often amazed at the number of people I arrested who claimed to be Christians. In fact, I typically mocked these phony believers in the presence of other non-believing officers. I laughed at the hypocrisy of Christians we took to jail for robberies, murders, and other violent crimes. But what if these theists weren't really being hypocritical after all? What if their theistic worldview actually encouraged and supported their criminal behavior? Atheist websites have often suggested that criminals use religion to justify their crimes. Georgetown State University criminologist Vokan Topali and Timothy Berenza and Mindy Bernhardt published research entitled, "With God on My Side, the Paradoxical Relationship Between Religious Belief and Criminality Among Hardcore Street Offenders." Aggressive advocates of atheism then highlighted the study in an effort to demonstrate a connection between religious belief and criminal behavior. And since 44 of the 48 criminals interviewed in the study claimed to be Christian, Christianity is the focus of their condemnation. But these vocal critics of theism are misapplying the findings of the study. The Georgetown research actually confirms the need for intensive theological accurate Christian prison ministry. The criminals interviewed for this research repeatedly displayed an inadequate or theologically incorrect view of Christian teachings. Now let me give you the examples that this J. Warner Wallace has provided, and bear with me. If you'll stick with me, we'll get through it and you'll understand. Example 1, there was a guy named Q, and he said this. This is what he said when he was interviewed for the study. He says, "I believe in God and the Bible and stuff. I believe in Christmas and, the commitments and whatnot." And the interviewer says, "You mean the commandments?" And Q says, "Yeah, that. I believe in that." And the interviewer says, "Can you name any of them?" And Q says, well, I don't know. Like, you don't steal and you don't cheat and shit like that. I can't remember the rest." The interviewer said, "How about the Bible?" And Q says, "Yeah, I know some of that. You know, heaven and hell and Jesus fighting with the devil, but for real, I didn't really go to church enough to know like all these details, just the important shit. Like Jesus forgives you for all your bad shit if you donate some money to the church or pray and say you're sorry." The interview pointed out the transcendental penalty for murder was eternal damnation. And said this to the trigger man. This is a trigger man. This is a different person. Talked about, hey, you gonna go to hell for murder. And the trigger man says, no, I don't think that's right. I mean, anything can be forgiven. We live in hell now, and you can do anything in hell. When it all ends, we go up there, heaven, and the devil comes down here. Only the devil lives in hell forever, man, all by himself. God has to forgive everyone, and even if they don't believe in him. And then another example was a criminal that said, and his name was Young Stunna, who said, "Well, you do get punished for doing wrong, but not if you don't have no choice. It's like here, see, if I go and rob a mother fudger, then I'm still going to heaven because it's like Jesus knows I ain't had no choice, you know. He know I got a decent heart. He know I'm stuck in the hood and just doing what I got to do to survive. But you now, if you talking to the interview, if you rob somebody, then you might get punished because you going to the pearly gates, and Jesus going to be like, why you robbing that mother fudger when I gave you a job and a nice life already? What's up with that?" And then another criminal says, "The way it works is this. You go out and do some bad, and then you ask for forgiveness, and Jesus has to give it to you. And wipe the slate clean. So I always do a little quick prayer right before, and then I'm cool with Jesus. Also, another thing is this: if you're doing something wrong to another bad person, like if I go rob a dope dealer or a molester or something, then it don't count against me, because it's like I'm giving punishment to them for Jesus. That's God's will. Oh, you molested some kids? Well, now I'm God sending cool over your house to get you butt whooping. Another criminal named New York Red said, before I do anything, I pray right, and to me, it keeps me out there longer until it gets to a point where it seems like God says, well, I can't let you get along. I can't let you do this no more. See, I do believe that people can change, but that has to come from the Most High. When you get that calling, that is. You know, I have a cliche that I say, I'm getting high to the day I die. I'm doing this to the day I die, unless the Most High intercedes, that is. Miami, which is another criminal, says, I think God is forgiving, because, you know, what I learned from going to church, you know, sometimes it's like that guy that was on the cross with Jesus. Both of them did wrong, and that at the last minute, one of them asked God to forgive him. And I figured as long as I be able to ask for forgiveness before I die, I'm going to heaven. But if somebody shoot me and I don't get no chance to pray, you know, I'm going to hell. So I came up with this great idea that, hey, I ask God in advance, if I don't get a chance to pray, to forgive me, you know, for what I've done. And then I feel like God knows in my heart that I don't like what I'm doing, but that's the only thing I know to do. So those are hardcore criminal justifications. And what the article is saying is there are people that says, hey, look, these people are trying to justify what they did by talking about God and Jesus and all this stuff, right? But what the point is these people are not knowledgeable. These people are not knowledgeable enough, and they are using it as a justification. And the reason that they're using it as a justification is because of their ignorance. And I don't say that like they're stupid or not. I'm saying they don't know, right? Criminals who try to rationalize their illegal behavior with religious justifications such as these do a great disservice to the orthodox teachings of Christianity. The Georgetown researchers acknowledged as much by saying, it should be noted that our results do not indicate that this criminology effect occurs from the content of religious doctrines per se. Rather, it appears to be the result of either an imperfect or purposely distorted understanding of said doctrine applied by the offender to their decision-making process. Criminals who justify their actions with religious doctrines are typically woefully ignorant of or purposefully distorting these doctrines. Biblical theology is the cure, not the problem. The criminals I've arrested who identified themselves as Christians were very similar to the subjects of this study. Biblically illiterate, uncommitted, occasional church attendees who identified themselves with Christianity, even though they had no idea what it represented or taught. Studies repeatedly demonstrate that prison ministries focused on theological training, along with educational, vocational, and life skills training, are far more successful in reducing recidivism than educational, vocational, and life skills training alone. Belief in God may not reduce criminal behavior, but a proper understanding of Christian theology will. And the reason that I read this article to y'all is that the hardcore criminals, the reason that they use religion to justify things is because they don't know, and that they're purposely distorting it. I'm not saying all. I'm just saying, and this is a very large study from Georgetown University. So what does this have to do with Chad and Lori? Well, we both know that Chad and Lori knew the Book of Mormon, They knew, well, I don't see any evidence of anything having to do with the gospel of Jesus Christ in what they did. I never heard them speaking of any of that. The only time they brought up Jesus was when Lori said she saw Jesus face to face, and Chad said he had been Jesus on a different planet or whatever. You heard no talk about salvation through Jesus Christ or Christ on the cross and what he did for mankind. By dying on that cross, he gave us the chance to accept him as that perfect sacrifice so that we could be reunited with our Heavenly Father. Now, this is just my perspective. This is my belief. And what I'm trying to say is that Chad and Lori, what they did was they took all these things, and we've said this before, but this is just for emphasis. They took a lot of things that they knew from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and they expounded on it. And it wasn't hard to do that because the church believes in revelation and that you get your own answers and all these other things that maybe I don't know about. But they were able to, that was an open door, basically, to go down the road that Chad and Lori went. They broke all the 10 Commandments. There's no way that somebody could tell me that if they look at the 10 Commandments on a bare bones level, I'm not here to judge them. I'm looking at the person stealing the candy bar in the store and being able to say, well, there's a thief right there. It doesn't matter why they stole it. The fact is they stole it, right? And Lori and Chad absolutely committed murder and theft and all of these things. I don't have to go back through it again. So it can't be hyper-religiosity, because then those symptoms of that would not, we would see evidence of that. And it can be, and it will be bared out in the sentencing phase, I believe, that this doctor that the state has employed to differentiate the differences between the two, that he's going to bring out, and I'm positive, and you've heard it here, that he's going to say they used religion as a justification. And most of us know this. This is my opinion, and many of y'all share that. But it's going to be a lot better once that sentencing phase comes through and we get to hear the audio, or perhaps maybe by then we'll get in camera. But we're going to be able to hear more of the technical, the reasoning behind that from someone who's a professional. KJ's just an old country girl, but I just wanted to make it clear to y'all that Rachel Smith has said their expert is going to differentiate between hyper-religiosity and versus justification of what they did through their religion. And, like I tried to bring out with these hardcore criminals, there is no difference. Because even though these criminals probably had a life of it, and Chad and Lori didn't, the very moment they murdered somebody, they're right there with them. Let me just be clear. If someone goes out here and murders 100 people, and someone else comes out here and murders one person, there's no difference. The sin is the sin. It is. I mean, y'all might disagree with that. But the bottom line is that Chad and Lori are no different than those hardcore criminals. In fact, because they had good upbringings, maybe that these hardened criminals didn't have that. They had families. They went to church. They had stable lives per se for Lori. But anyway, what I'm saying is they had a better income. They had a better demographic lifestyle and all of that. And the fact that they knew their doctrines and their scriptural stuff makes it even worse for Chad and Lori. This goes back to what was said earlier about, they speak of me They speak of me with their lips. What is it? The people honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. In vain they do worship me, teaching as doctrines the commandments of man. It was a commandment from the lowercase g, Chad and Lori, that those innocent people had to die. They can justify it all they want. The bottom line is we're going to know. We're going to know the technical aspects of it as we move forward. I wanted to share that and let y'all know that that's where Lori's going. And perhaps, who knows, Chad could, we don't know if he's had a brain scan or not. He's not put any mental health defense out there. Maybe the state has this expert to head them both off at the past. Maybe this isn't just about Lori. Maybe Chad's going to say he had this accident when he left his body and really he had a concussion or some kind of brain problem. I think somebody had spoken a while back on this thread about how, maybe he's had a brain scan or something. And maybe Lori did. She had 4 doctors at the Idaho Department of Health and Welfare and 2 that the defense, that the defense hired. That's 6 total experts or professionals that saw Lori. And so we don't know what that's all about, but the clue is why. Why would Rachel Smith tell everyone in that hearing that this doctor that they've got, this expert, is over hyper-religiosity versus doing something and justifying it by saying it's their religion? Because there is a distinction. So leave your comments. Let me know what you think. I hope everyone has a great Sunday. We have some people coming over later for Super Bowl. And I want to thank Red Handed and her husband Bill once again for all we are, as we are once again together, you and I. My hat, I'm going to wear it on Valentine's Day. And you know what? We're going to have a good time on Valentine's because my heart is open to all of y'all. We're going to be talking about love. We're going to be talking about the evil heart. So get ready for it. Be looking for it. It's already, the announcement's already on the channel. So I've got some surprises waiting on y'all. So anyway, I love you. Have a great Sunday and keep on looking.